that, buddy? That's not good.
Not yet. Wait for it. Hit him again. We did it. We got them. Come on, move up now. Let's go.
It worked. I can't believe it worked. We're gonna be rich. Get the money, come on. Gotta move quick.
I don't see the money, do you?
No, I don't. Let's get the hell out of here.
You're probably wondering, what the hell was that? This was probably one of the weirdest and most terrifying stories I've ever come across while researching Anthracite horror stories. This was an absolute slaughter that occurred above ground, not underground, but on the surface. This incident was linked to the Truesdale breaker, and you're seeing that breaker on your screen right now. What occurred here was essentially a terrorist attack on the mine employees. In the modern era, we've come to learn of this incident as being a command-detonated, improvised explosive device, an IED, essentially a roadside bomb. This was a very sophisticated bombing for its time period also. Not one, but two explosives were set off. This was a daisy chain IED. The first blast would be to initially cause some destruction, followed up by a second blast to really inflict maximum casualties and destruction of property. Also, the second explosive is set off just in case the first one misses. Roadside bombings and improvised explosive devices were used by the Irish Republican Army in North Ireland during the 1960s through the 1990s during the Troubles. Improvised explosive devices, IEDs, and roadside bombings would be perfected by the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. These are nasty instruments of death to face off against. The fact that this occurred in the northern anthracite coal field in the year 1930 is utterly astounding and horrifying. So now I'm going to read from an article that was published on January 7, 2019 in the Times Leader by Ed Lewis. The article is entitled, "Look Back, 4 Men Killed in 1930 Payroll Robbery in Warrior Run," again by the Times Leader. 4 men were killed and another man disfigured when the mine car they occupied exploded as it traveled between the Truesdale Colliery and the number 20 tunnel in Warrior Run on January 13, 1930. The mine car being pulled by a locomotive was bombed by dynamite placed under tracks in an unsuccessful robbery attempt to steal $35,000 in payroll for 600 coal miners of the Glen Alden Coal Company. The attempted robbery might have succeeded but for the frightful carnage caused by the explosion of a huge charge of dynamite under an electric mine locomotive trailer used as an auxiliary pay car, the Times Leader reported January 14, 1930. Killed in the blast were Arthur E. Webb, 32 of Scranton, James Shovelin, 32 of Hanover Township, Martin Burns, 31 of Sugar Notch, and Frank Brzezinski, 36 of Plymouth. Payroll guard Fred Pfaff, 60, Scranton, had his right leg above his knee and his left foot amputated, and payroll guard John Sookie, 45 of Plymouth, suffered minor injuries in the blast. The 6 men were inside a mine car with an iron box that contained envelopes of cash to pay the miners. As the mine cars switched onto tracks of the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad headed to the number 20 tunnel, a terrified explosion was heard, the Wilkes-Barre Record newspaper reported January 14, 1930. Luzerne County detectives inspected the blast site and noticed under the tracks wires that led to a battery nearby. A witness on the locomotive pulling the payroll car and another witness on a locomotive of the Lehigh Valley Railroad saw two men rummaging through the wreckage and disappearing in woods. Less than 2 months after the explosion, John Tex Nafis, 41 of Curry Hill, Plymouth Township, and Sigismund Big Joe Sasowich, 25, who resided in the Salvation Army Hotel on Hazel Street, Wilkes-Barre, were indicted by a Luzerne County grand jury on murder charges on March 9, 1930, the Evening News reported the same day. District Attorney Thomas M. Lewis sought first-degree murder convictions and the death penalty for Nafis and Sasowich, who had separate trials. Lewis told jurors Nafis and Sasowich planned the robbery and explosion at a tavern in Lee Park, Hanover Township. Sasowich stole the dynamite at the Truesdale Colliery, purchased wire at a store in Nanticoke and a battery in Plymouth, then placed 13 sticks of dynamite in one spot and another 19 dynamite sticks close by under the tracks. Nafis was assigned to ignite the dynamite with the battery upon a signal by Sasowich, who hid behind a tree waiting for the payroll car to pass over the explosives, Lewis told jurors, as reported in the Record on April 1, 1930. Stories published in the Record and Evening News about the separate trials reported packed courtrooms and people waiting on the third-floor corridor for a seat to open in the courtrooms. Judge William S. McLean presided over Saskowich's trial, held in April, and Judge W. Alfred Valentine presided over Nafis's trial in June. Saskowich and Nafis were found guilty of several counts of first-degree murder and attempted robbery by the separate juries. When they were sentenced to death on November 15, 1930, Saskowich and Nafis maintained their innocence, the Evening News reported the same day.
I didn't get a fair trial. I never done it.
Saskowich told Judge McLean.
I didn't get a fair trial. You got the wrong man. That's all. Let her go.
Nafis proclaimed to Judge Valentine. The state Supreme Court upheld their convictions and sentences, and Pennsylvania Governor Gifford Pinchot refused to pardon them. Pleas to the State Board of Pardons for clemency were also refused. Sasowich and Nafis were executed May 25, 1931 at the State Rockville Penitentiary in Bellefonte, the Evening News reported the same day. And that was the end of the Times Leader news article, again, written by Ed Lewis. Wow, what a messed up story. Those two guys went till their graves saying that they were innocent. So you have to wonder, you know? Man, I hope those guys were really the culprits, because if they were innocent, that would be really, really terrible. They didn't mess around back then. 6 months after being found guilty, these gentlemen were executed. 1930 was a hard year. The Great Depression had just kicked off, and people were desperate. I mean, very desperate. A lot of people were hurting financially. I'm sure that the Great Depression caused a lot of Americans to do things that they would have normally never have done. Getting your hands on dynamite was not hard back then. It was everywhere in the Wyoming Valley due to the mining industry. Bombings would become frequent in the valley, believe it or not. There was a lot of labor strife in this area, and bombings were very, very common. Whoever set that charge off, the initial 13 sticks of dynamite and the other 19 sticks, I would argue, was definitely trying to kill whoever was on that train. There's no doubt about it. They had no regard for human life on that train. Sasowich, Nafis, or whoever detonated the dynamite on that day were most likely mining employees, and they would have known the power of what that dynamite could do. So Sasowich, Nafis, or again, whomever the bombers were, if, say, Sasowich and Nafis were innocent, were cold-blooded killers. That's why the state pursued the electric chair, I would imagine, and also to dissuade other would-be bombers from doing an act like this. Again, you hope that they caught the actual bombers because I'm sure there was a lot of laid off mine employees due to the Great Depression. So that means that there was a lot of people out there that were hurting for cash, that had access to explosives, and more importantly, experience in using explosives. Plus, I'm sure a lot of people knew when that train pulling the payroll came by. It's really unfortunate too that the payroll guard, who is 60 years old, lost his right leg above his knee and he had to have his left foot amputated. They said that John Suki, who was 45, had minor injuries. I don't think that any of the survivors of that attack walked away with minor injuries. The shock waves from those blasts, again, the first bomb consisted of 13 sticks of dynamite, and the second one was 19 sticks of dynamite, would have been horrendous on the survivors' brains. It would have done so much damage. Unfortunately, it can alter your behavior, your personality. It can do all types of bad things to your body. So who knows what those survivors had to endure for the rest of their lives in that regard. Let us not forget the victims from that day, who were James Shovelin, Frank Brzezinski, Arthur Webb, and Martin Burns, who were only guilty for going to work. Their only crime was hitching a ride on a train that day, going from the Truesdale Breaker to the Warrior Run coal mine. These men were just trying to provide for themselves and for their families. I don't know why those bombers blew up that train. Why couldn't they have just worn masks and held up the train, say at gunpoint or whatever, you know? To blow up the train, they were even risking blowing up the money itself. The whole thing is just madness. Pure madness. No one needed to die that day, that's for sure. So this was rather ironic timing. One of my viewers actually made this for me. He made this out of a 3D printer, and it's actually functional, which is amazing. It's like a working reproduction. Inside of it, there's a rechargeable battery. There's wires in there that he gave me also that hook onto these terminals, and at the end of the wire, you can plug into your cell phone. How cool is that? I found remnants of one of these batteries in one of my mine exploration videos, and I wasn't sure what it was. And he said, hey, that's an old dry cell battery, and that was used for the old mine phones. So he messaged me and said, hey man, I want to make you a working replica of one of those batteries. I was like, all right, cool man, appreciate it. What a nice guy he is. Thank you so much, Justin. The top pinned comment is going to have a link to his channel, so please be sure to give him a subscribe. Also in the description of this video, his channel is going to be linked. Very, very creepy timing for receiving this, because the night that I was basically wrapping up making this video, I picked this up at his house, and it dawned on me that the bombers used this kind of battery, most likely, to set off those explosive charges back in 1930. That is odd, isn't it? Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Yo, this guy looks like me. It's really weird. Take a look at this. He does resemble the king of coal, and he's going down a slope in a man trip car. Looking back at the camera, loving every bit of it. Look at him. He's like, yeah, man, I'm the king of coal.